Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, Mr. Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian. And today we're continuing our series on There's More to Money Than Money. There's more to wealth than money. There's more to riches than money. There's more to money than money. And so our part 3 of our series, we're getting back to guests. We've got a few guests lined up that we're going to be having on the show, which we're really excited about. But today, a little bit more of talking about, people work until a certain age, some because they have to, some because they want to, some because they don't see it as work. All those ramifications of that, especially for our family's special needs issues. Stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hey, everybody. You all ready to go? Rock and roll. It's Brian sitting here with Shawn Francis. And today we're talking about there's more to money than money. If you're catching us live on Facebook, leave us comments. We'll look at the comments. We see them all the time. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, we're Just Two Dads. Thank you for picking us up wherever you're watching us. Hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends. Help us grow the audience. It'd be great to have you. And if you're listening to us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands or on any of the podcast outlets, thanks for making us part of your listening day, whatever day you're hearing us. Hopefully our content continues to be interesting and compelling. And whether you have a family member in the special needs community or not, our goal here is to shine the spotlight on those things and those individuals and those services that impact all of our families. And if they impact our traditional, neurotypical, quote unquote, normal families, then they're going to impact our special needs families 10 times. And so we want to provide value. This is our episode number 161. So we've been doing this about 3.5 years, and we're excited to be doing this. Thank you to Sean Hall, before I forget, in Hawaii, who sets up all of our graphics and kind of lines us up, keeps us in order, keeps me in order, and keeps me in line.
Because I'm in order and I'm in line. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Us. Who keeps us in order. So without further ado, thanks everybody for hanging out with us and spending your time with us. Without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Shawn Francis. We're going to talk about some really fun stuff today.
Yep.
How are you doing, buddy? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Blessed, grateful, and excited. And for people that will see this, they'll think, we're going to talk about money because of our work in financial services. We're going to talk about how much money you should probably have when you retire, the right accounts to invest in, and all that kind of stuff. And that's true. We'll touch on some of that. But, what we're really thinking about is, again, the idea that there's more to money than money. So generally speaking, what does retirement mean to anyone? What does it look like? Most people don't even stop to think that retirement is when you have choices. You may still work. There's a gentleman by the name of Adrian Dantley that played with a handful of teams in the NBA. Spent time in, I believe, with Utah, and played with the Detroit Pistons. Was a perennial all-star. And I saw a story the other day where Carmelo Anthony was saying that that Adrian Dantley is quietly one of the wealthier former NBA players. And he was a crossing guard someplace. I don't know what city. I don't know if this is in Detroit, where I think he last played. But people were asking him, that recognized him, asking him, like, what are you doing this? He's like, I like working. I like interacting with children. I'm a crossing guard. He was like, what is so strange about it? But like you said, everything that affects the general population affects our community, those of us who are parents and or caregivers to someone with special needs or a diagnosis, 10 times as much. And retirement is the same thing. So for us, it's like, okay, what does retirement look like to you? Have you thought about that? How does being a parent or a caregiver even affect retirement? And unfortunately, and I don't have to see any statistics to know this, most people probably think about retirement when they're at least well into their 30s, if not older. If you get a job and, your employer offers a 401k, you might think, yeah, okay. You think about retirement because maybe you should participate, and that's about it. And so on our show, we have conversations more so than interviews. So as much as you're willing to reveal, I figured I'd just ask you some questions the way we do as we just sit around and kick it. And, this is going to ask you, what does retirement look like for you? And with Jordan being older and fairly independent, her diagnosis and your experience might not weigh into that. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But what does that look like or mean for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting question because a lot of it, I think, comes from, how you're brought up, what your experience is in general, how you look at the work that you do. I will say this, I'm often surprised. People look at the word retirement. What does that mean? I mean, for me, the traditional idea of working for one company for 40 years, retirement is like, we're tired, man. That's kind of what it's short for, right? Retirement is like, we're tired, man. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to come in and clock in and work at a job that I've worked at for 40 years. But that whole conversation has shifted from our last episode where we were talking about, the gig economy and the change in work. I think retirement is different. And I used to say this, in talking to folks about financial services. And Warren Buffett, I don't know how old Warren Buffett is, but Warren Buffett's not retired. One of the wealthiest men in the world. Right. What you do, you're not trying to retire from work. If you're working for somebody else, you want to be done with that at some point and enjoy your life. But I know people who find, and I'm one of these people, who find enjoyment in the work that I do. I'm like Adrian Dantley. I would, be a crossing guard if I was in this situation. Wherever you want to engage with people. To me, I just heard a story literally today about Mookie Betts, who's got a 9-year contract with the Dodgers, and he's done with that show. When he's done with that contract, he's done with baseball. And so, what's somebody who has more money than that ever be able to spend in a lifetime do? He's like, I'm going to turn to bowling. I want to be a bowler, because that's what I like to do. That's my passion. I love doing that. And so I know he's going to do it professionally. Could do it casually, but he's a competitor. So I think retirement for me is, I don't really look at it the same way because I watched my parents who had their own business. They were entrepreneurs. I watched them do the things that traditionally people do in retirement while they were working. My mom and dad took, week-long trips to Europe and, 2-week-long cruises. And, they did everything they wanted to do because they had the freedom to do all that financially and with time. They had time freedom and financial freedom to do whatever they wanted while they were working. And so there were times of I think it's like, where do you concentrate your effort and your focus, right? So that's kind of where, for me, retirement is, is really a misnomer. It's sort of like, what is that? What's the definition? Because the definition is different for everybody. And I remember, I'm going to say this one thing, and then I'll let you ask another question. For those that have never seen it before, they probably, don't understand. We both talk endlessly. I'm guilty as well. But I was going to say, when I ask somebody in their early 20s, when do you want to retire? But I laugh about it because they all say the same thing, like, next year. Like, I don't want to work. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, right? In your 30s and 40s, you're like, oh, I do it until until the kids are gone, or until I don't need the benefits, or I don't need whatever value they're getting out of the work. And if they're older, like, I want to retire as soon as I can, or I want to retire at the point that I've accumulated enough assets that I can live without having to work, right? Work because I want to, not because I have to. And I think true financial independence is working because you want to, not because you have to. So for me, I love the work that we do, and I love getting paid for the work that we do. And so I just turned 60. I'm going to do this for as long as I can and want, and that it makes sense. And if I can do the things that I've always wanted to do, I have the best of both worlds. So hopefully that answered that question.
It does. And not to be uninteresting, but my answer is exactly the same. The only nuance is that I know there are other things that would come into play. We're honored to be able to be paid to do what we love to do, with our time, working in financial services, doing this podcast and everything. But, neither of us is completely financially independent. So if that was the case, I had complete financial freedom, there are other things that I would add to it. But the answer is similar to yours. The things that I would add to it would be like, whether I'm contributing to something or creating something, it would be, what can I do to help as many people on as large a scale as I possibly can? But what's interesting, I think one of the things that would be beneficial is, for instance, one of the things I might do is try to change the way people think about retirement. For instance, retirement, I looked up the definition, and I was surprised that it was not anything a little different. And it just says when one withdraws from the workforce. And I guess maybe I need to look for the Latin meaning, because I know that when you retire for the evening, it is to rest. I'm going to retire. You're going to bed. But I think that the whole notion of thinking of exactly what you want out of life, period, that alone is still, unfortunately, a revolutionary thought, because most people don't think, well, what do you, at a certain age, we're asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I think the better question is kind of, what do you want to be, period? And work towards that. And that should be something that we continue to do as we go on. Now, when a diagnosis comes into play, or if you're all of a sudden caring for an elderly loved one or something, those things change right away. And how big the change is obviously is determined by the diagnosis, the severity, and those types of things. So for some people, like we, know that some people are like, look, I'm trying to get through today and this afternoon. So I can't even think about tomorrow. But, that's the other thing. Another reason why I think that one should think about what they want to do with their life. We're never too young or too old to think about those types of things.
No, for sure. Well, it's funny because, we call the United States, the home of the free, right? Land of the free. Yeah. And yet we build in this, 40-year, sort of a 40-year prison sentence into our mindset about, going to work for a company and taking the, retirement plan, the golden, the watch and the severance package when it's time to stop doing that. I've seen people who and again, things change with the times. I've seen people who are in part of the older generation, the greatest generation, even the baby boomer generation, that have got to the point where they retired and they passed not very long after retiring, because what they had known their entire life provided some meaning to them. And that once they retired from that, the question of like, what does my life mean anymore, shifted and changed. And I think that, part of the things that we can do, and part of the things to evolve as humans, is just sort of think about what our life means while we're young and while we're able and while we're working, while doing things. Because if we find the true meaning of life and the meaning of our life, then it's going to help us to know that the thing that we do is something that we do. Again, it goes back to the be, do, have, right? Who am I being? How am I being? And then what I do is, falls out of that. And then what I have comes after that. Because I also know people that have retired. My father retired a long time ago, by the way, went to Hawaii, where he's always wanted to do, and plays golf every single day. I don't know if he does any work at all anymore, but he's been retired for really like 25 or 30 years, because that's what his whole idea was, to, make a lot of money early and then be able to get up every morning and play golf. And he engages with people. He connects with people. For him, that provided meaning for him, to be able to go do something, with people in a golf setting. He ended up teaching on the PGA Tour for a little while as a putting instructor. That was for him the thing that he loves to do, and he still does it casually. And so that's a different kind. That's what I say, from my perspective, I look at that and I'm like, I don't consider retiring, removing myself from the workplace. I consider it to be bringing the work into my life and making it part of my meaning of my life, if that makes sense.
It does. And that's what the definition should be, really. Not, when I looked at it, I was disappointed. I was like, that's wrong. It shouldn't be like when one withdraws from the workplace. It should be when one draws more meaning or purpose to their work, whether the work is, something that they're doing for a wage or something that they're just doing for fulfillment.
Yeah. I mean, I think people get fulfilled. And I know that people, when they retire, they join boards. They join advisory boards. They join boards of directors. They join boards of nonprofit organizations. I have a friend, ran into his wife last night, and he is, he's like the chairman emeritus of of an angel investment organization and does advisory work to, entrepreneurs, because he was an entrepreneur once himself. And so he now is of service to those folks that were in a position that he was once in. And so I find that to be a lot of the folks who have drawn meaning from their work life and have now in their retired life, meaning they can choose to work. They apply those skills and those things to help other people accomplish some level of success.
Right.
Meaning.
The other thing is I was
meaning.
thinking of, if for anybody that's listening and they're on a fixed budget, a fixed income, let's say that you're, I don't know, maybe in your mid 60s, your 70s, you're quote unquote elderly statistically, you don't have any children or grandchildren, you're on Social Security and maybe some other source of, whether you're lucky enough to have a pension or whatever, and your situation is fixed. It's not too late for you to think about what would give you purpose as well. It's great to think about, okay, how can I make a little more money that'll give me some breathing room and won't take too much energy or, be tough on me physically. That's great. But think as much also about what it is that you love. There's probably something that you haven't thought about in a while that really brings you a lot of joy. And I say that because if you're on this income and you're here, there's people that are listening to this that are in a situation where they're pretty much waiting to pass away,
Sure.
And that may apply to someone who's a caregiver as well. But just the idea of how you might be able to add some kind of purpose to your life by doing something or contributing to something that brings you joy, that's a great place to start. That's a great place to start. And one is never too young or never too old to think about making the best use of their time here on this spinning planet.
For sure. Listen, I also think that there's a societal component to a lot of this. Going off my chair. That it by imposing a retirement age, and the government sets retirement age, just so everybody know. By imposing that, it's almost as if you've dictated value. Like you're only valuable and meaningful to us until age 65.
An affecting mindset to begin with. Yeah.
For sure. Right. And that's part of the issue, right? People are like, well, I'm going to retire because they say retire at 62, 63 or 65 or whatever. And it's as if there's after that age, you're not worth anything to us. Like you don't add any value. And so that is only in our culture, by the way. That's not the way it is in Japan. It's not the way it is in other cultures, where our elder population is revered, honored, respected, seen as adding a ton of value. When I was getting my MBA, one of the projects I worked on was an intergenerational daycare center, where you bring young pre-K kids in conjunction with elderly folks. Look, they both need the same kind of support, right?
Yeah.
And so the value that our young children get, it being exposed to an older generation is it's valuable and meaningful. It does mean something. I have a couple of mentees that I work with who see me as, help me understand the mindset I need to be in at this stage, because you've been there, right? Valued my experience and my background to get some value out of that. And I think that that's a shift that has to occur here as well. Look, our elected officials are in their 70s and 80s, for crying out loud. If they can run the country and be the president of the of the I don't say the wealthiest, but the largest economy, one of the largest economies in the world, in their 80s. Clearly, there's value after age 62 or 64 or 65. Clearly,
most definitely,
there's capability.
Most definitely.
And so, again, I don't know why we've imposed this on a workforce that, that's told this message. And it's all marketing. I hate to say it, because, one thing government doesn't want to do is they don't want to support older folks, any kind of subsistence. They want people to work and build up their retirement funds so they don't have to come to the government for support, those kinds of things. So I think that, again, the requirement is a total shift in how, and I think it started after the pandemic. I think the shift, the gig economy, the way we think about work, I think that shift is occurring now, and definitely with remote access to everything and the work from home and being productive where you're productive. I think we're starting to see some change in that overall mindset.
Definitely. So then let's shift a little and then talk about the professional and the boring but valuable stuff in terms of numbers and or products and things like that. Now, I know the one thing you and I are familiar with is that each person should figure out what their financial independence number is. And that is what's known as a FIN, right? So in other words, the answer or the question is, how much money will you need to live the quality of life that you want to live when you retire? And there's several things that people don't stop and think about, which is, well, we expect taxes to raise in the future, no matter who's in office. That's number one. Number two, most people think in generalities when they think about a goal or a desire anyway. So if you're in generalities and you lack specificity, you then have a decreased shot at that goal or dream coming to fruition. So, the thought is then, where would you like to live? How would you like to live? What type of things would you like to be able to do? What would you do with your time? What would that cost? Get some kind of idea. So knowing that number and then back engineering it to today allows one to arrive at what that financial independence number is. And again, if you're a caregiver or a parent to one with special needs, there's challenges to be taken into consideration. But let's say a person is, I don't know, I'm 22 years old, just out of college. I've got a job that pays me X number of dollars over what I need to live. So maybe not the tightest situation, but I'm doing okay. What would be your thought as to where someone should start from a financial standpoint in terms of getting to the point where they no longer have to work?
Well, so here's the thing, right? A couple of things to what you're saying. First of all, the idea of retirement. The idea of retirement has to be, people have to understand, like, that's a choice, right? Retirement means working because you want to, not because you have to. You're not relying on your income to pay your bills. Being financially independent means you have enough money to pay all of your bills, all of your expenses from now and into the future, however many years that looks like, and not have to go to work to pay those bills. That's truly financially independent, right? So that's one thing, is like, when do you decide you want to stop working because you have to? Second of all, a lot of people don't even think about that number, right? A lot of people say,
most don't,
right? Most don't. The only thing that they come close to is like, man, if I hit the lottery, then they envision how they quit their job, right? All the things they're going to do when they quit their job because they won the lottery, which is a false sense anyways. But that's the closest people in general get to thinking about, what's the number? How much money do I need? Because I've thought, what if you won the lottery and it was $280,000? It's a lot.
Right. And it's funny because if you're going to go on a cruise, you're like, well, what does that cost? Which is a very logical question. And once you shop around for prices and stuff like that, you get your answer. Maybe it'll be inclusive and it includes food. Oh, if it doesn't, we'll need to consider that we're going to have to spend money on food. We want to get a house. Well, what does that cost? Where might we want to live? Want to get a car? What does that cost? People think
but that's even, but that's even the next stage. That's the next level. The first level is like, some people don't even think.
They don't, and that's just it. My point is that when it comes to those things, we'll stop. Well, I'd like to do so and so. What does that cost? But nobody stops to think about, here's what I like my life to look like, or here's what I want to do. Let's take retirement off the table. What do I want my life to look like? I want A, B, C, and let's say they get past the generalities and get to the specificity. Even when they're there, the one thing most people are still never specific with is, okay, what does that cost? And they usually have no idea, but it's all there for us to figure out.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, so there's a bunch of different ways to get to it. One is what you're talking about, which is, what's my life going to look like and how much is that going to cost me? There's another one, which is, I'm just going to pull a number out of the air. I guess by $10 million, I'll be good. Right. No idea, no basis or anything. And will 10 million last? Is it a million? Is it 10 million? Is it 100 million? Like, what's the number? And so again, some people come to the number just pulling it out of thin air. Second is that they go, well, I want my lifestyle. So I don't want to have to work to pay my bills. So I want to be free of that. Some people are like, I'm going to pay off all of my stuff and then I won't have bills. I'll pay off my house, pay off my car, pay off all my stuff, and I won't have bills. Then I can stop working, without thinking, of course, well, there's property tax, there's insurance, you may have paid off your car, but you still have to insure it, right? There's a whole bunch of things that still come with those things. So that's not the approach. The approach is I just pay everything off because I won't have any bills at that point. Some people say, well, if I do all that and I live in a very low cost area, middle of the country or whatever, then at least my bills will be low and my Social Security will pay for it. If you believe Social Security will still be around.
Right.
We call it so security because we still don't know if Social Security is going to be around 20 years from now. So the other way to do it is to really look at, is there a way to calculate it? And I will there is a way to calculate it, and people should start thinking about, and it's not a retirement number, it's a financial independence number. It's how much money do I need to not have to work to pay my bills? I can still work, but I don't have to work to pay my bills. And so, we focus on that in the area of financial services and for special needs families too. The challenge with the special needs families is that a lot of times there are unforeseen expenses into the future that may be needed, like, certain kinds of medical support or other kinds of support that may be needed that we don't have an idea of what that's going to cost. And that has to be calculated, has to be figured out. Right.
Right.
And so what we focus on in our business is helping people literally break down, how, like, look at your living situation today. Is that the kind of situation that you want to live in for the rest of your life? Because at least you have, you can put your thumb on or finger or thumb on what that number, because what's your lifestyle costing you today? Right. And at what age do you think you want to stop working because you have to? Like, how old are you now? What age do you want to stop? If you're 32 and you want to stop working at 50, you've got 18 years to make the money to live for the next, 35, 40 years without having to work. Like, once you start thinking about that, because you could retire really at any age. Most people automatically pick 65. What if you want to retire at 55? Much easier to kind of plan it out when you're in your 20s and you retire at 55. But when you're 52 and looking at 55, much different situation. So when do you want to stop working? How many years is that from now? Like, right? What's your lifestyle like now? Is it what you want, or would you envision a different lifestyle? Maybe a bigger house, maybe a house with a vacation home, maybe a house with a bunch of travel. At least with today's numbers, you can figure out how much am I spending today to live today's lifestyle.
Right.
And then I want to change my lifestyle. Maybe I'm going to double the amount of my lifestyle, right? Maybe I want to be twice as good as I am today. Then between now and that age of retirement, factor in inflation, because that erodes your buying power and erodes the value of your dollar. Now that your number changes a little bit, because if you can live on $5,000 a month today, $60,000 a year, you might go, okay, well, so 600,000 gets me 10 years. Today, no inflation, perhaps, but with inflation right now, after pandemic, we're seeing 8% inflation rates. 6% inflation, that $50,000, that $60,000 a year is not going to buy the same thing 10 years from now as it does today. Right. So you have to calculate that into the equation, and then you look at how much do you have now? How much have you accumulated in assets now? What's the value going to look like in the future? Some growth, you can build in some growth and take in the, again, the inflation and adjust for inflation. And then you come down to what you really, in order to live the lifestyle that you choose lifestyle, to retire or to stop working because you have to at a certain age, you'll come up with a financial independence number. And then that number is the target. And by the way, when you figure out what that number is and you can actually put an actual number on paper, you should print as many of those pieces of paper as possible and put it all over your house. Because
the number can be scary too.
Sure, yeah. It could be $16,420,000. Something outright, right? That you could be like, I have no idea how much I'm going to need or buy, or what that's going to mean for me. But if you take in all those other things into consideration that I just mentioned, you'll get closer to what that number should look like without any unforeseen issues, like extra health expenses or medical expenses or support or long-term care as you get older, those kinds of things,
Right.
right? And so I think that people, again, we're in this mindset of you work really hard, retire at 65, take your Social Security, the idea is your house is paid off, kids are out of the house, you have lower expenses. So then you just live on Social Security the rest of your life. But that's not realistic. Or it is, but it's not, it's realistic for many, but it's not living the kind of lifestyle that you'd like to live or that most people would like to live. And what they do is they become resigned and they become cynical and they become, hopeless. And when that happens, they settle and they don't care about the future and they put themselves into a spiral that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, I'm just going to die soon and, be done with it.
Yeah.
And I think that the work that we do, and the work that I think that people should be looking at is just getting people to understand, to look at what that looks like. I have a client right now. She's 70 years old. And she's like, her husband passed away. So my husband passed away. I'm 70 years old. I'm still working. And I'm going to work for 3 more years because at 73, then the government's going to make me take my retirement, and require minimum distribution. And I'll live off that. And I'll be okay with that. And I thought, a few years after that, you're done, right? And then what? And that's sad because the idea should be, I'm going to work because I freaking love what I do, and I'm having a great time, and it gives me purpose. I do that, and I'm focused on all the things I'm going to do. Now, to her credit, she's going on a cruise in May, so
Fantastic.
She's living a life. And I've said to her, my goal for you is I just want you to live a life, without stress, financial stress, and live a life that with dignity, that you plan to live like you dreamed of living. And she's like, well, I'm going on a cruise with my sister in May. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Do that.
Right.
Because by the way, Bob, people are like, I'm going to build up these assets and I'm going to leave them to my kids. I'm going to leave them to my kids in my retirement. Well, I want to leave my kids a legacy in my estate. And I keep thinking, okay, well, that's assuming that you don't have any health issues or long-term care issues or any other things that are going to eat away at all that. And your kids want you to live like a pauper, want you to live on ramen, want you to live miserly for the rest of your life, or do your kids want you to live a life full of adventure and all the things that you're physically capable of doing? The reality is all children really want their parents to, listen, a lot of kids, I'll be realistic, and ideally they want their parents to live their greatest life. And realistically, they want them to live that greatest life without having to come to their kids for support, right?
Right,
so, Mom,
exactly.
Live your great life and spend all your money. Don't worry about us. We're good. We'll figure it out on our own. You go and have a great life. But that mindset, that marketing thing that we had about what people should do is, leave all this to your kids and leave all this and it all needs to shift. It all needs to change.
You mentioned
sorry for doing that, but
no, it's okay. That's okay. You mentioned a term that made me think of another direction for us to shift in, which is things that people should know about. And this applies again, anything that affects the general population affects the special needs community 10 times as much, if not more. So you mentioned, the first thing you mentioned was RMD, required minimum distribution. So let's work our way towards that. But let's say getting back to, the person that's in their 20s, if they get a decent job, they're out of college, whatever have you, they might not have investment or saving experience or be savvy, but they're probably going to be presented with a 401k. And the one thing I want to say is I don't know what the numbers are. I know once upon a time, there were a fair amount of people that would get jobs, be there for years, and never participate in a 401k. And the first thing we want to say is we have to be very general about what we say and share, because we're both licensed individuals. And so, we have limitations on that. But when it comes to the first thing I'll say, and then I'll have you add to it, is like with a 401k, understand that if an employer offers one and they offer a match, the first thing you want to find out is, well, let me back up. The way that they're usually offered is you go to work and they may have a presentation. Right? If you're lucky, that's the most that they'll do. And they'll give you some basic information. What they're more likely to do is just give you some literature or send you a link where you can just sign up for it and you have money that's taken out. You're told that it's going towards your retirement. That's the end of that. Several things to keep in mind. More often than not, a lot of that money is going to be invested in the stock of the company, depending on the size of it. So you should be well informed as to whether or not you want to do that. The other thing is you should find out whether or not the employer offers a match. If they don't offer a match, you might want to get some education as to other options that are out there for you, because the money can be put more to work for you. If they do offer a match, that's quote unquote free money that you got to have a pretty good reason to not take advantage of that. Because what that means is you're putting in a certain amount, they're matching that as well. That's money that you get and have, and take that with you whenever you leave that job. But then the other thing with a 401k is, if you touch that money before 59 and a half, because let's say you don't have any experience and you're putting a fair amount in there and it does well over a handful of years, you've got a certain amount of money in there and you're like, I'm going to get married. I want to take that out, or I'm going to go on vacation. I want to do so-and-so. Unless you're buying a house for the first time and you're a first-time home buyer, if you take that money out prior to age 59 and a half, you're going to be penalized. And then if you consider that whenever you take it out, you're going to be taxed as well, that means if you take it out before 59 and a half, you're going to get the penalty and the tax as well. So most people are not aware of that. And then at 72 is when you have the required minimum distribution. So those are
73 now, by the way.
73. Yeah. See, now it's 73.
Just changed in January. Yeah.
See that? So, and then it goes back to the other thing. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the government has plans out there and options for you. Take advantage of them, but know what they are, because what happens is you have to ask yourself, do you want to rely on just what they provide and have them make choices for you? Or do you want to make the best choice based on the parameters that they provide? Those are things that one would, ask themselves. And again, when you are faced with a diagnosis, or if you're caring for a loved one that's elderly, that applies tenfold. And for anybody that's listening and kind of feels like, well, I'm not caring for anyone that has special needs. Like we always say, two things. One, anything that affects the general population affects the special needs community tenfold. Two, if you're blessed with a long life, you're going to become a member of our community anyway, whether you have a child that has a diagnosis, or care for an elderly loved one, or are blessed with a long life yourself.
Yeah, agreed. And here's the thing. We talk about these kinds of things all the time. A lot of times people don't realize that. So a 401k was created for as a way of the government putting a bit of the onus on employers in this country to contribute to employees in retirement. Again, government doesn't want to provide subsistence to elderly population that is living longer these days with medical improvements and other things, other factors. People are living longer. Government doesn't want to pay for subsistence. So they want people to take advantage of the retirement programs that are available. Is why they offer IRAs as a pre-tax, tax deduction, if you will. They tell their employers offer 401ks. So again, a pre-tax, which is a tax deferred retirement plan, to encourage them. By the way, and they'll provide some tax benefits to the employer for doing that. But the reality is, and that's why the employers contribute. But most employers really, unless you're a massive organization, that's a difficult expense to maintain and control. And so you'll see the employer contribution or the employer match over time has gone down. In the old days, in the original days of the 401k, the employer said, you put in $1 and we'll put in $1.
Which goes back to the 80s, by the way.
Yeah, back to the 80s, all the way back, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then it became, you put in $1, you know what? We have to reduce a little bit of our expenses. You put in $1, we're going to put in 50 cents. And you put in $1, we'll put in 25 cents. You put in $1, we'll put in a dime. And now sometimes they don't even match. In many cases, they don't even match. And yet they encourage people to max out their 401k contribution for their retirement, which today now it's up to about $24,000, $24,000.
Which benefits the business and not the employee.
Exactly. And not only that, but it's tax deferred. So if you're in your 20s or 30s and you're investing in a 401k that you can't touch, as you said, till you're 59 and a half without a penalty, then your money is untouchable. That's 20 or 30 years down the road before you can touch it. Exactly. If taxes are going to go up, as you stated, and they are, going to go up in the future, you're
Right.
going to pay a massive amount of taxes when you take that money out 30 years from now. Sometimes when the employer was like, well, you put in $1, we'll put in $1. Back in those days, their dollar covered the tax exposure you may have. Today, it doesn't. So maxing out, and again, not advice, but looking at a situation, everybody has to look at their situation, what their employer provides when it comes to these retirement accounts. Because what happens is you end up paying a lot of, and this is the crazy thing. Going to my 70-year-old client one more time, just for the thing. She has an income because she still works. She collects Social Security because she's 70. She collects her husband's Social Security because he's now passed and she's getting his Social Security. But because she makes more than $25,000, actually, yeah, $25,000, now 50% of her Social Security is taxable. So they've held on to that money for 40 years. You can't touch it. Then when you want to get it, if you make a certain amount of income, by the way, over $34,000, you're taxed on 85% of your Social Security benefits. So if you're counting on Social Security, yeah.
No, go ahead. Well, yes. So hold that thought. I was going to say,
yeah,
this is the thing that people don't, think about. Getting back, this is like to the basics, because you talk about how much you make is important, but how much you keep is even more important. And so what happens is when you earn money, it's taxed. When you spend money, it's taxed in the form of sales tax. And then when you pass away, it's taxed in the form of estate tax, and you're not around to complain about it. So touch on this, if you will, the buckets, because we have, there's money that as it relates to tax purposes are defined as tax now, tax later, and tax never. Touch on those. And then in the tax never, talk about the IRAs and the restrictions and qualifications for that.
Sure. Yeah. So the tax now bucket is a taxable bucket, which means that certain income that you earn is taxed at the end of that year. So you earn interest on your savings account. So you're saving your CD, the CDs, your savings. Sometimes if you sold stock during the year, the gains are taxed. So it's like you earn a certain amount of income, whether it's rental income if you own rental property, or interest income if you have investments or savings. Those kinds of income classifications are taxed at the end of the year. I always joke about it. IRS sends a Christmas card with a thing called 1099 on it, right? So it's like you're running you're running a race basically, where every 3 steps forward you take a step back to pay the tax, right? By the way, often good to have liquidity, place for you to have some liquid cash, but not a place for retirement where you've got to pay the tax every year. So that's tax now, or taxable. Tax later, or tax deferred, is exactly what it sounds like. It's generally a pre-tax contribution, and you pay the tax later when you take it out. A 401k, if you're a teacher, a 403b, if you're the services, a 457, maybe a pension, something where you're taking a pre-tax, basically a pre-tax contribution, which lowers this year's income taxes because you're taking it out of your income tax. You put it in the bucket and it goes away. And then when you take it out, then it's taxed. And the difference between those two buckets are that a taxable bucket, you're taxed on just the gain, just the amount of money that you've made, the extra gain. On a tax deferred bucket, you're taxed on the contribution you put in and the gain. You're taxed on a much larger amount. Yes.
Now, before we get to the tax, never, free. Right?
Yeah.
Or tax free, right? I want to kind of reillustrate for everyone, repeating what you just said with an analogy. Think about this. Imagine yourself as a farmer, okay? And you're in business with the U.S. government. The government says, we are going to tax you. We can tax you on your seed, right? Which you have the seeds in front of you right now. We know how many they are, and there's a predictable amount that you will be taxed on. Or what we can do is tax you on the harvest. Now, you don't know how much the harvest is going to produce, right? So you don't know what the amount of the tax is going to be in the future when the harvest takes place. So with that in mind, you have to ask yourself, would you rather be taxed on the seed or the harvest? Right. So that means it. And if you talk about the age of the harvest, it's also going to be more than likely, in the case of a retirement vehicle, taxed at the time when you need it the very most also, which brings us to the value, of the next bucket, as well as the items that fit that classification.
And before I get there, because you just said something really cool, which I want people definitely to think about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take that money out and your contribution and your gain sometime in the future, what's the tax rate going to be? It's an unknown.
Exactly.
You said it, right? It's an unknown.
Right? Yeah.
It would be like me saying, listen, I'm going to give you a loan right now. I'm going to loan you $100,000 and you can pay me back in 10 years. And I don't know what interest rate I'm going to charge you for that loan. It may be 2%. It may be nothing. I may at the time feel very generous and not charge you any interest. Pay me back just the principal. But I may need that money. So I may charge you 80% interest. But don't worry about it. We'll figure it out down the road. And we'll figure it out. And I'll tell you when it's time to pay me back how much you're going to pay me in interest. Who would ever sign a deal like that? You never would. But we put our 401ks and our IRAs, which, by the way, have a bunch of limits, which we'll talk about. That's the contract you're signing with a retirement plan set up.
And keep in mind that we're not saying those are bad things. We're saying that this is one of 3 buckets, which is why things should be in different places, including the bucket he's going to get to. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think it's it's one of those things where people are like, wait, what? Now that you say it that way, that doesn't make any sense, right? And people like when people go, oh, that sounds like a pyramid scheme. Social Security, these kinds of things are really pyramid schemes. The amount of money that you put into these things, the amount of money that you get out is not exactly what you think it is. And so people have to kind of look at those kinds of things. So let's talk about the tax-free bucket or the tax never bucket. There's only a few things that qualify under the tax never bucket. Just some of the simple, like if you like bonds, if you like buying, municipal bonds in the area that you live, those are tax-free. There's generally 2 kinds of things. Most people are familiar with a Roth, whether it's a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. They're familiar with that because that's after tax dollars going into some account, and then it grows, and then you have access to that. And by the way, if you have a Roth IRA and you make contributions, you actually don't have to wait to 59.5 to take out your contribution. You can take your contribution out prior to that without a penalty. It's the gains or the upside that you've accumulated that you can't touch or you get penalized, just in a Roth, just for general people to know. So in the Roth, though, again, as we've talked about, a lot of these government programs where they offer you something, they also have limitations, right? 401k, they limit how much you can put in. On IRA, they limit how much you can put in. You can only put in $7,000 a year, which is cool. With a Roth, not only is there an income, is there a contribution limit, there's also an income limit, which means if you make more than $141,000 as an individual, or you make more than $240,000 as a couple, you don't qualify for a Roth. You can't get a Roth. It's not available to you. Roth was intended for sort of middle America, right? And so people say, well, where do wealthy people put their money? What if you make a really good salary? I can't get a Roth if I make a really good salary. I'm being penalized. I don't get a tax-free financial vehicle because I make too much money as in my job or in my career path. And yeah, in a way, yes, you cannot take advantage of a Roth. There's other limitations to the Roth. We'll put that aside for the moment. The other thing is that's where life insurance comes in. We talk about life insurance a lot in our financial services business because it's one of the most misunderstood financial products. And an insurance company, just for people, that's a financial institution. You put your money in a bank, and a bank puts its money in life insurance companies, whether it's products or services or investments, whatever. They put their money in insurance. So we always tell people, don't put your money in a bank, or put your money where the banks put their money, in insurance companies. Banks like to poo-poo insurance because it takes money out of the market, it takes money out of their assets under management and puts it in insurance. But an insurance company is a financial institution. The most secure, conservative financial institutions, also some that have been around for over 140 years in most cases. Life insurance has been around for a very, very long time. Why? Because they're the most conservative companies. They're still a financial institution. They just They've just evaluated the risk factor of holding money and making commitments to payouts, right?
And then,
So
yeah, I was just going to say the other thing is what it takes for them to remain in business in terms of solvency is completely different from what a bank is required to do to remain in solvency. A life insurance institution has to have reinsurance so that should they go bankrupt, which is very rare, they have the solvency to support the claims that are tied to their clients.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So listen, again, we talk about the benefits of life insurance because life insurance provides a bunch of benefits. Life insurance provides, you can provide long-term care. So if you live a long time and you start to get to that point where you're getting older and you need long-term care, a life insurance policy can provide some long-term care support. So if you live a while and get sick, it's there. If you don't live as long as you hope, your life insurance pays your family a death benefit. That's tax-free, by the way. No taxes, tax-free. And if you live a very long life and you're healthy and you've put money into a permanent life insurance policy, the cash value, the equity grows considerably and you have access to that. By the way, if you're young and you're looking at you're in your 20s, like, why do I need life insurance? I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a house. I don't have assets to protect. Who's going to get my life insurance? Really, that's the best time to have life insurance because you get the compounding interest impact of putting money into a life insurance policy and having it grow over time. So you don't need it? Cool. You don't need it? Then build it up and let it build equity value. You get married, guess what? You walk into a marriage with a big life insurance policy. Now you have a new beneficiary. Your person's taken care of in case something happens to you. But it's not generally most, there are variable life insurance products that are invested in the market, but the ones that we, support are those that are not in the market. And those, unlike like your Roth, even your Roth IRA or your traditional IRA or 401k that's invested in the market, it's going to lose value when the market drops. Certain kinds of life insurance policies like we like don't drop if the market drops, go up if the market goes up. So think of all the advantages. Takes care of you if you're sick, takes care of your family if you die, takes care of you in cash value that you can access. Tax-free access to your money while you're alive, tax-free death benefit to your family, when you pass, can't lose any money if the market goes down. Like there's so many advantages to a life insurance product that people don't realize. And as a supplement to what people do for their retirement, 401k if it's offered by work, an IRA if they're independent, or a Roth IRA if they want to supplement those that restrict your access to that money. You supplement that with a life insurance product. Now you've got the ability to start to build some financial independence and some true asset accumulation. And more importantly, enough support of your financial freedom that you can start to think about what's your financial independence number? How much do I have in assets? How much will I need in the future? And can I put something in place that provides me some protection, some support for my health, and some legacy that I can leave my family so that you are not, living on ramen and Social Security.
And the other cool thing about it is depending upon the product and the provider, many of them have the equivalent of what we used to see with cell phone providers in the early 2000s in the form of rollover minutes. So in most cases, the limitations that you can contribute to these policies are greater than the limitation that you would see in a Roth or a traditional retirement vehicle. And what happens is, in addition to it being higher, let's say you don't max out in that given year, whatever you haven't contributed, that rolls over to the next year. So you could have a handful of years that goes by and you've got a large bonus or you've got a tax return that's of a considerable size, whatever the case, and you can contribute there. You can also decide, okay, I want to pay premiums up to a certain age, but then I'm going to stop. I would like to use it as my own pension and contribute to, for a certain amount of years and then turn on income by a certain period of time. And because you have to qualify for it and it's based on your lifestyle, gender, and age, those are the things that determine premium, which is also why it's much more cost effective when you're younger And then what happens is once you've got those numbers and factors in place, you can structure it to do the things that you want it to do. It can be used to protect key individuals in business. There's a variety of ways that can be done. And like Brian said, it's meant to supplement the other things that are in place. The best thing to do is to make a well-informed decision. There's a lot of decisions or opinions that out there that arrive with, or that people arrive at with a very high degree of ignorance. And the opposite is what should take place no matter what you choose to do.
100%. And that's why sitting down with somebody who knows can provide that support, that valuation, that education, it helps you make that informed decision is definitely critical. And that's why that's what we do. Obviously, we love talking about this, and we, want people to feel informed so that when it comes to that decision of when you want to stop working or when you want to work because you want to, Warren Buffett doesn't work because he has to pay his bills. Bill Gates is not working because he has to pay his bills, right? Elon Musk isn't working to pay his bills. Elon Musk likes to create stuff. Elon Musk is going to create companies forever and ever and ever and ever because he loves it, not because he has to pay his bills. That's a position you want to be in.
And you don't have to, and it doesn't, and if you hear that and think, oh, those are eccentric billionaires, that's not me. You don't have to be them or Bruce Wayne in order to get yourself some freedom based on education.
Right. Get some education. That's our point. So as we wrap up our show, we went way long, but by the way, I think this is good stuff to know. People should, have access to this information because it is available. Thank you for joining us and making this part of your day. Thank you for, your comments privately and publicly, and thank you for your, for making us part of your listening day. We appreciate all of you. Thank you to Sean Hall out in Hawaii for always keeping us on path. Sean and I do this, or again, episode number 161, because first of all, we love talking. That's not obvious. We love talking to people who support the special needs community, but we love our community as a whole. And we just want to provide, value in the work that we do. So thank you for joining us today on live on Facebook, or again, after the fact on YouTube. Hit subscribe, share it with your friends if it's of value, if you find it interesting. If you have ideas that you'd like us to talk about, hit us up with an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. We are just two dads. Also, Sean and I host a bi-weekly men's support group for dads of dad caregivers, special needs family members. It's called The Den. It's in our show notes. So if you look us up on our show notes on our YouTube channel or on Facebook, there's a form there to join. It's free to join. We don't charge to join the group. And it's just a safe place. It's called The Den because that's where guys gather to have, real conversations with one another. And I would thank our friend Billy Footwear for creating adaptive footwear for folks who struggle with putting their shoes on. And his story, Billy Price, the founder of the company, it's fascinating. I encourage you to go to billyfootwear.com and look that up. Have I covered everything, Sean? I think I've kind of covered everything, right?
Yep. And if you use the link that's on your screen right now, you get 10% off of your purchase. And if that happens to take place when they're having a sale, that 10% applies no matter what. Fantastic story and fantastic mission in Billy Footwear.
Yeah. I last thing I'm going to say is now more than ever, empathy and love. Look at somebody's situation, have some empathy. You don't know what they're going through or what they're dealing with in the moment or in general in their life. So have some empathy because, don't be judgmental. You never know what's happening. The other thing is look at the world through lenses of love. The world is such a different place. It means it's so much to share love. Again, now almost more importantly than ever, share love. Sean, I love you. And then you're going to knock us out here, but thank you for being a partner in this and all the work that we do. I love doing this with you. It's my life.
Most definitely. Love you right back. And speaking of love, which I did not mention at the top of the hour, because on this day that we're actually broadcasting here, it is Valentine's Day. So, make sure that you make, some people think that Valentine's is actually a bit of a hoax and it's all capitalism, whatever the case is. The truth of the matter is it's a good excuse to be reminded to spread love each and every day. And while it's tied to romantic love, make sure that you take the time to let the people in your life know that you love. Let them know that. because it's easy to take that stuff for granted. Tomorrow's a bunch of things, but a promise is not one of them. So remember that questions are more powerful than statements. Let's try and be more childlike and less childish. Be as curious about each other as we possibly can and respect each other's space. Remember that everybody needs to be seen, everybody needs to be heard, and to know that they matter and that they're loved. And there's also tremendous value that you get from actually knowing that you've actually seen someone and heard them as well. So to each and everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you very much, and we love you.
We love you. See you again next week.